Hey guys, how's it going? So this is going to be a little weird since we're teaching a lesson without anybody in the classroom. You can kind of see there's nobody here. Okay. Uh, because there's nobody here, I'm not going to wear a mask. Usually I would, but so we're going to jump into some world geography. The the way we started last week was using some maps. I gave you guys a map of U.S. and Canada. If you have not got those done, that's fine. We'll get that fixed when you get back. So I just wanted to go over some basic geography with you today. Um, Miss you guys. Hopefully things are going well. Text each other, have some company. Uh, Not in person, of course, but don't leave each other out. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and get started with Chapter 5, World Geography, the United States and some Canada. I'll probably go fairly quickly through this. If you want to pause the video so you can write things down in your notes, that's fine. Um, Other than that, if you have questions, just comment on the classroom or send me an email, and I'll answer you when I can. Thanks. So let's get started. Okay, so section 1 is all about the land, physical geography. Let me adjust this a little bit. Um, it's about the land. The United States is a very diverse place. We have a lot of mountain ranges. We have a ton of landforms. Let me just go over a few. Some of them are obviously written on there. So we have a lot of mountain ranges in this region. The western half of the United States covered with mountain ranges. Um, and then next to that, on the coast, we have more mountain ranges, the Cascade Range, Sierra Nevada Range. In the middle there, we have what's known as the Great Basin. It's this area in here. The Great Basin down here is a bit of desert. We'll talk about why that is in just a minute. In the middle of the United States, we have the Great Plains. They extend from Texas to North Dakota. They butt up next to the Rockies. That might not be exact, uh, but that's the Great Plains. We are pretty familiar with these. Short grass prairie, limited rainfall in part of it. Once you get to the eastern part of the Great Plains, they get more rainfall. So moving eastwards, you started to get into some forest in this area. Forest and farmland starts to get a little more hilly. The soil darkens. In Nebraska and the Panhandle, we have a lot of lime, and it's not so good for farming, but it is really good for ranching. Eastern Nebraska and Iowa, they have a lot of black soil, really good for agriculture, especially farming. And then once you get over into the eastern part of the United States, we have the Appalachian Range. It extends through most of the eastern seaboard. And then next to that, we have the Atlantic coastal plain. Right. So the United States has a bunch of diversity. We have mountains that transition into a basin, into more mountains. Again, we'll talk about that in just a second. And then we move into the Great Plains and then into more rolling farmland and then back to mountains. Let me clear that. We'll move on. Okay, the rain shadow effect. We talked about the water cycle a while ago. We have collection of oceans or rivers. Then it evaporates up, evaporates into the sky. It cools down, condenses into water droplets, and then precipitates on the windward side of the mountain. The problem is most of the mountain ranges are too high for the moisture to carry up over them. It condenses before it gets over the top. So on the other side, on the leeward side, you have what's called the rain shadow. It ends in the desert. It's a dry climate. It's not very, doesn't have much moisture. This is what we see in Nebraska because of the Rocky Mountains in the Panhandle, at least. That's why we have a much drier climate than the eastern part of the state. Sorry, it's a little awkward. I have a desktop to annotate on, so I gotta move some things. Okay. Um, Here's what I was talking about. the annual precipitation. Oops, gotta highlight the pen. The annual precipitation in this region is a lot. Well, maybe not so far south, but in the Pacific Northwest, they get like 80 to 200 inches of rain a year because they have almost a rainforest climate. There's so much water coming in off the ocean into the mountain ranges, and then it cools and precipitates it right in here, and then it doesn't get over the mountain range. You can see the mountain range right there. It's a big mountain range, and then the Sierra Nevadas, and then the Rockies. You can see where it rains and where it doesn't. Right, the red is obviously not raining, and once we get into the Panhandle of Nebraska, we have about 15 inches of precipitation a year between rain and snow. And then once you start to transition east, the rain shadow effect wears off, and these guys get most of their weather from the Gulf of Mexico blowing in. You get a lot of rain in this part of the state. And then obviously as you move east across the United States, they get more rain off of the Gulf of Mexico. You can see they have tons of rain down here. They also get hurricanes and other things that we don't necessarily want in Nebraska. Okay, clear that. Moving on, the formation of Hawaii is a cool geographical feature. Hawaii is formed by volcanoes. So what happens is the magma comes up through the chambers and overflows, and then it cools into a rock. So these islands flow up and out, and the islands are getting bigger with time. So things are growing. Hawaii is growing in size every day. It's not much, but it is every day. Kind of cool to see the diversity that they have in Hawaii. Pretty tropical place. Clear that. Okay. Once we move into Canada, we get into the Canadian Shield. The shield is a giant core of rock, and it's centered on James and Hudson Bays. You'll notice that in this region, right? A giant rock core. It's not so good for farming. It's not good for much. The ground is really hard underneath the soil. The western part of Canada gets quite a bit of rain. The eastern part is it also gets rain, but most of the people live in Canada live in the southern part of Canada because the weather is so much warmer there. Like 80% of people in Canada live in this region, bordering the United States, because the weather can be so extreme in the winter. Okay. Clear that and move on. Some vocabulary to think about when we talk about water. The rivers, they have tributaries. They flow into big rivers. So you have small rivers like the Niobrara around here, flows clear through Nebraska into the Missouri, and the Missouri dumps into the Mississippi, and the Mississippi dumps into the ocean. The headwater is where the river starts. So you'll see the headwater of the Mississippi is up here in Minnesota, and the headwater of the Missouri is over here in Montana. But they still both flow down into the ocean. Pretty cool concept. The Mississippi has a lot of volume. That's why the river is so wide down there. And a divide is a high point or a ridge that determines which way the rivers are flowing. The most famous divide is the Continental Divide. You'll see that on the red line right here. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the highest point in the United States. It just means that's where the water switches directions of flow. So everything west flows down and out. Everything east flows down and east. That's why all of our rivers on this side of the Continental Divide flow into the Mississippi. Okay. Here's just a map of some rivers in the United States, just the major ones. On here, Nebraska doesn't look like they have that many, but if we move forward, you'll see they have a bunch. So which state actually has the most miles of river? Nebraska. Look at all these rivers. That's not even all of them. We have more surface area of water than any other state in rivers. It's massive. Okay. Just some other lakes and waterways, not important for you to understand. I just wanted you to see all the major lakes in the United States. In Nebraska, you'll see like Bosque Reservoir in the Panhandle, Merritt in north central Nebraska, Calamus in east central Nebraska. We have a lot of fishing opportunities here in Nebraska. Transitioning into natural resource, part of our physical geography is our resources. We have fossil fuels and minerals. The fossil fuels are formed in the earth from buried plant, and then it turns into coal or crude oil or natural gas, which we then extract and use for energy. Some other natural resources include wind power. We have turbines on land and in the ocean. Pretty impressive. Some people say they're not efficient. Others say that they're super efficient because they're clean energy. They are kind of expensive, but when you think about it, it's renewable. It's always windy in Nebraska. It's always blowing out there, especially last weekend, like 45-mile-an-hour gusts. Pretty ridiculous. Ironically, they can't run it when it's that windy. Um, Also, we have coal mines, lumber, fish. That's a lot of fish. And some farmland. Arguably, our most important resource is our farmland. Turning crops, which we then feed to cattle and people, helps us grow. Just can't put a price on good land, right? And aquaculture, fish farming. Fisheries are a place where fish and sea animals are grown. We grow a lot of trout here in Nebraska. The Game and Parks does a lot of work with stocking trout into local lakes like Carter P. Johnson or the Ice House Ponds or Grable Ponds. It's a big money industry here in Nebraska. Whoops. Let me back up one slide, double clicked it there. So the closure is the US and Canada have a wide variety of physical geography, making it interesting because there are so many regions that make it unique. They're chock full of natural resources that help us in our everyday lives. So I know that was fast. Again, you can go back and pause it. You can slow down and see what we covered there. If you want to take some notes, again, shoot me an email. Figure out what you understand well and what you don't understand well. I'm not going to give you an assignment with this. I know you're going through a lot right now, but I hope you're just staying safe, and I'll keep you in my thoughts. Have a good day.